It's wonderful to see so many of our students, faculty, staff, and alumni here tonight. Of course, we all wish we could be together in person, but this is the next best thing these days. I'm David Boardman. I'm the Dean of the Klein College of Media and Communication. On behalf of our faculty and staff and of the Klein College Alumni Association, I'm pleased to welcome you to the inaugural session of the Klein Voices series, in which some of our most accomplished alumni will share their perspectives on the crucial role of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the worlds of media and communication. We're grateful to have three spectacular alums as our guests tonight, and you'll hear more about them shortly. This theme could not be more timely. In the wake of the COVID-19 crisis and its bearing of the profound inequities in our society and of the social unrest that followed the killing of George Floyd, it's been a period of reckoning for corporations and media institutions across America. Overdue conversations, many of them quite difficult, are finally happening. Will meaningful change follow? Our alumni experts will tackle that and other questions in this series. These issues are really at the core of Temple University and the Klein College. The origin story of Temple, as many of you know, begins with a commitment to access to excellence for people who in the 19th century had been deprived of quality higher education. In the 21st century, we remain committed to those values. And at Klein, the ongoing pursuit of diversity, equity, and inclusion is at the center of our identity as a college. 2 years ago, we were recognized by our peers for this commitment when we won the Equity and Diversity Award from the Association for Education in Journalism and Mass Communication. And they recognized us not only for the diversity of our faculty, staff, and student body, but for the manner in which these DEI values are evident in our curriculum and our programming and our culture at Klein. We celebrated that accomplishment for a minute, but we didn't rest on our laurels. Instead, we've used it as a platform to do even more. Soon after we won that award, we created the position of Diversity Advisor to the Office of the Dean, which is the first such school-specific position at Temple University. We're proud to appoint David Brown to this position, and David will be moderating our session tonight. The Klein Voices series is sponsored by the just amazing Klein College Alumni Association, which is just a wonderful, committed group of alums who support our college and our students in myriad ways. It's my pleasure to introduce the association's president, Jackie Hopkins.
Thanks so much, David. Good evening, everyone. I'm Jackie Hopkins. As David mentioned, I'm a proud 2010 graduate of the Communication Studies program and president of the Klein College Alumni Association. We thank you so much for joining us this evening, and your continued support of Klein College and Temple University means the world to us. My experience as a board member for the Alumni Association began when I was a student representative over 10 years ago. Feels like a lifetime, but giving back to Temple has meant so much to me, and being able to pay it forward, that time, that creativity, that financial support that Klein afforded me throughout my undergraduate experience is really what drives me to give back to Temple and especially to Klein. As a first-generation college student, especially who grew up close to campus in Alumni, Klein's commitment to Philadelphia, to student success, and to equity and inclusion especially, allowed me to thrive in our urban living and learning laboratory, also known as Temple's vibrant campus. And so I hope your memories of your time at Klein, your time at Temple, or your time currently as our students and faculty are just as fond as mine. And we'd love you to stay connected for those of our alum that are on with us this evening. There's strength in numbers, so I really do invite you to learn more about our Alumni Association opportunities, and you're able to find out more about participation at klein.temple.edu/AA for Alumni Association. But without further ado, the reason we're here this evening, I really want to thank you again on behalf of the Klein College Alumni Association to kick off our Klein Voices series. As David mentioned, it is a new series that we have just started, and it's designed to create a space for Klein College alumni to come together and engage in meaningful conversations around topics that are critical to the communications industry. And as you know, so many of the thought leaders and change makers in this field are our own alum. And we want to celebrate their stories and their impact. And so we're really excited to have our wonderful panelists here this evening. We're thrilled that the topic, of course, is centered around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how that fits into the future of media and communication. As David mentioned, I can't echo enough, at this moment in our country and in our world, we cannot prioritize a better topic for these important dialogues. And I really do want to especially thank our Rockstar alum who are going to be leading us through this conversation, and really are working to set examples and create a more righteous and just world. And so Klein College, I don't want to repeat too much, but we are really committed to DEI at every level. And to guide us tonight in the college's efforts and conversation, I'm thrilled to introduce David Brown, Assistant Professor of Public Relations and Diversity Advisor to Dean Boardman. And as well, David Brown advises Temple's IDEAL, which is the Institutional Diversity, Equity, Advocacy, and Leadership Office at Temple. David, it's been a pleasure working with you. Thank you for all of your support. And without further ado, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Jackie. This is going to be a great conversation, I know already, because it's going to be a very important conversation. And I'm a big fan of all three of our panelists in many different ways and diverse ways, which is great. So I'm looking forward to, really kind of moderating how we're going to have our conversation. And just a couple of quick ground rules in that, while we're certainly here, we've got a lot of folks who are behind the scenes who are going to be monitoring the chat, monitoring questions and so forth. We've got a bunch of questions, and you'll find that the answers from the questions from our panelists will probably prompt more questions. We're going to run out of time, and that's okay, but my responsibility is making sure that we end and land on time. So I'm really, really anxious in a very good way to get started in terms of our conversation. So let me introduce the panelists. I know that in the age of Google and smartphones, you can probably look up all you can do in terms of getting their background. So we'll leave it there, but I do want to also set the serious tone of our conversation, because we are finding ourselves just today, third day of the trial for George Floyd. We're finding a lot of, unfortunately, a lot of our AAPI folks under attack and violence. We're finding ourselves in a racial reckoning, and as it's getting warmer, it's something that we're going to kind of take a look at and continue to try to navigate. So certainly, this is going to be a powerful conversation, because the lived experience and the professional experience of our panelists are going to be a part of what we're going to be able to explore and tease out. So I'm going to introduce them in this order, and you'll be able to, as I said, find out more information. But one of our panelists, the first panelist that I'd like to introduce, is Michelle Wright. You have already in the flyer when she came out of Klein, but her current title is President TV1 and CLEO TV. I've already shared with Michelle that I'm a huge fan of what she's done in terms of a trailblazing path, as well as the content that she continues to celebrate on her channel. The next up is an old friend and colleague, Rachel Ezekiel-Fishbein, who also a Klein graduate. You can look up when she graduated. But I've had the honor and pleasure of working with Rachel throughout our mutual careers. She is the owner of Making Headlines PR. She's also an instructor here at Klein, teaching on public relations, and we're just so glad to have her. And last and finally, certainly not least, is Elizabeth Morrison, who is the Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer of Levi Strauss Company. And that's a recent introduction to me, but I am a big time fan of her product and the work that she's doing. And if those of you are seeing her on the screen, you can see that she is on the move, but she is safe and stable. And so that's a good thing in terms of where we are going in terms of our conversation. So what I'm going to ask us to do is to we're going to start engaging in the conversation, and again, encourage you all to stay as engaged as you're able to in terms of connecting with. And I'm glad we've now switched so I can see the Hollywood Squares grid of our conversation. And I'd like to start first with you, Michelle, if that's all right, just to tell us a little bit about yourself and why and how diversity, equity, and inclusion is an anchor in your life, either as it has been throughout your career or the work that you're doing now. And don't forget to unmute yourself.
Hi, Temple University, and thank you for having me today. You know, I would say just growing up, it's been an anchor for me. Growing up in New Jersey, I grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood. My neighborhood wasn't very diverse. I always was looking for images, both within my neighborhood and on television. There were no, you know, when I was growing up, there were no television shows really that showcased little girls of color. And so when I had an opportunity to go to school, one of the things that I was really looking forward to was being, actually wanted to be on camera, but then shifted to being behind camera. That's a good note for anyone to please intern so that you know not only what you want to do, but what you don't want to do. But I said that to say that, you know, I always say to people that for young people, if they can see it, then they can believe it. And if you believe it, you know that you can be it. And, you know, I was very fortunate to have family members that, you know, basically told me I can do anything, but it's always hard when you don't see a lot of images of people who look like you. Doing the things that you want to do. So I always enjoy doing these things because I hope that I will be, you know, an inspiration to anyone who is looking to sit in the seat that where I sit today. So diversity, equity, inclusion is very central to, you know, what I do every day at TV1 and CLEO TV. There are two networks that are targeted to African Americans. CLEO TV is actually targeted to Millennial and young Gen X women of color. And so every day we, you know, strive to put out positive images and tell our stories. And the biggest thing that we want people to understand is that Black people are not monolithic. We have lots of different, you know, ethnicities within Black. And we want to tell stories in our voice and make sure that we are providing positive and fair and equitable platform for those stories to be seen by all. And we hope by doing that, that we will educate, you know, about our culture. And, you know, Black history is American history. And we're a part of the fabric of this country. And we want to just make sure that our stories are told in a positive way. And that's what we do every day. And I'm excited to do it.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Thanks for that answer. Rachel, same question. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how and why diversity, equity, and inclusion really is an anchor in your life. Don't forget to unmute yourself.
And I almost did. Thanks, David. So anyone on this call who's in PR knows that we end up being the voice of our clients. We end up encouraging them to use their voice certain ways, and we end up really being enmeshed in their mission. So if you're working in PR now, and if you've been doing it anytime recently, you really have to be thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion and the message that you're helping your client put out there. So I feel that it goes throughout all of my work. I think that my background story really informed how I feel about it now. So my mother was a Holocaust survivor, and my entire life was informed through that lens, having a mother who lost everything, her parents, her home, her sense of self and safety, all because of her religion and because of hate. But the thing that made my mom really cool was that instead of becoming bitter and being insular, she felt really strongly that she needed to use her experience to help others. So she very actively looked for other people whose voices were being silenced and people who didn't have access. And she set out on a mission to support them through work with voting rights as a teacher in North Philadelphia. So I was raised sort of seeing most things through a social justice lens to begin with. I was also very fortunate that I went to Philadelphia High School for Girls in Albany. And that's a school that draws young women from across the city, all of whom have a passion for learning. So in that school, you end up with a huge diversity that represents the city. And I was surrounded by other girls who didn't look like me, who had very different home lives from me, who felt lots of different ways. And because we were all working together, but we had in common our passion for learning, the diversity was something that was actually embraced. We had so much in common that then we could see what each of us brought to the table individually. So I feel as though these childhood experiences weren't necessarily typical. And in some ways, I was really lucky I had them because they prepared me for the shock of having one of my children diagnosed with multiple disabilities. I could not have fathomed the prejudice that my child and my entire family would encounter and how we'd need to work to process it and to learn to advocate for him and for our family as a whole. And so having had these other experiences, I was lucky to have a lens into what otherness felt like that prepared me for feeling other and helped me to use that to build resilience. And I think that experience of feeling other really informs everything I do in my business and certainly everything I do in my classroom at Temple.
Thank you, Rachel, for both the perspective and the personality and the personal nature of that. I'm a Central grad, so I know all about Girls High. So absolutely. And our third panelist, Elizabeth, same question. Tell us a little bit about yourself, even where you are, that would be helpful too, and how diversity, equity, and inclusion is an anchor and has been an anchor in your life.
Thank you so much. So yes, I'm in my car. I am making a trip from Philadelphia back to Los Angeles, which is where I reside, but grew up in Philly. But my story around DEI really, like each of the other two panelists, comes from my early life experiences. I was born in New York City to two parents that were born from very humble beginnings in Harlem, and we're both very involved in civil rights and social justice my entire upbringing. My mom has a pretty phenomenal story about marching with Gloria Steinem and burning her bra, and my father ultimately was a civil rights attorney, and my mom, after being a stay-at-home mom, then was a social worker. And so I grew up with such strong messaging around my values, the values that I developed that really were from my parents around using every bit of privilege and hard work that I could to advocate for others, to lift others, to being prepared for the fight myself that I was going to have as a Black American, with people either underestimating or discounting me, but full confidence from my parents that through education and hard work, I could do whatever I wanted to do and be whoever I wanted to be. And so that's kind of at the core of who I am. And I think DEI just was a natural outgrowth of that. And I was attracted to LS and Company, which is what we call Levi Strauss and Company, because of their strong values. A company that has existed, for over 150 years, obviously means that they've got a complicated history because they've been around through some complicated times. But what we see consistently is them being values driven, and really being out there, being a good corporate citizen, and being a company that's not afraid to stand for something, even when that something is popular with some people and unpopular with others, but it is the right thing to do from a human and humanity lens. And so that's how I've landed in this work, and a little bit about me and where I am right now.
Thank you, Elizabeth. As you all who are watching this can see, we've got a diverse, not only panel of diversity in terms of perspectives, but some really personal connections in terms of the work that is being done. So, Michelle, I'm going to go back to the top with you and talk a little bit about a question that's specifically directed toward the position that you hold, as you've worked your way up at TV1 and CLEO TV, and now you're its leader. So talk a little bit about how the industry that you are leading, how has it changed? And as president, how are you proactively addressing DEI at the company? I think one of the comments that you made, that there's diversity within diversity. So if you want to talk a little bit more about that, go right ahead.
So, David said in his opening remarks that really COVID, the pandemic, plus the killing of George Floyd really was sort of a reckoning time. And it certainly was a reckoning time in our industry. It really ignited some of the things that our industry we have talked about being issues. Number one, helping to bridge the digital divide became really exacerbated when, people were with virtual school and virtual work, libraries being closed. I think that people don't think about colleges, schools being closed. I think a lot of people don't think about, the luxury of technology. Everybody does not have high-speed internet at home, cable television. And so that was one of the things our industry had to address. And, frankly, a lot of it is urban and rural communities of color. And so we've definitely partnered with a lot of the distributors like Comcast and Charter Communications and, among others, Verizon, to make sure that we are supporting, pushing out digital products and services to those communities. So that's one thing that was really exacerbated, and one thing that we've all, as an industry, have really taken a look at. The other thing that you've seen with this is, everyone really starting to, not that they didn't understand it before, but you've seen a big focus on diversity in images and representation and storytelling. I mean, Netflix with strong Black leads, our network always provided diversity, but all of the different platforms from Hulu to broadcast television to cable TV have really, put a stake in the ground to say, look, this is something that we've been saying that we're going to do for years, but we really want to make sure that we have good representation of, everyone on television. And I do think that it has improved. There's still a long way to go, but I do think it has improved. So that's in front of the camera. One of the big things for us is also making sure that there are opportunities behind the camera, because a lot of the changes will come when you have diversity in media companies in your management ranks, as well as on boards. And when there are people in the room who look diverse and represent different parts of our society, then you begin to have, real diverse discourse and real diverse conversations and representation, because it's demanded in the room. And so that's one thing that we certainly, focus on, making sure that we have diversity within our executive ranks, that we show it on our screens, that we're providing opportunities for a pipeline through mentoring, both internal and external within our communities. And that's one of the big things that we want to do, is to make sure that we're educating, mentoring, and providing opportunities in our community. And we've, given opportunities with, new voices in terms of writers, directors, creatives, because, a lot of young people you're not going to get that anywhere else. And the other thing I would say is, we've also used this as an opportunity to educate a lot of our partners and clients. We fielded a couple studies during COVID and one on Black Lives Matter. And we've shared those insights with a lot of our big, partners, because there's always been, difficulty and honestly parity in terms of Madison Avenue and advertisers who are investing in independent companies like ours, Black brands, putting dollars against Black audience. And it's very important, especially since people of color over-index on the usage of television viewership and digital projects and services. And so they really need to, we have definitely gone out there to say, you have to put your money where your mouth is. This is an opportunity to do that. And then there have been a lot of companies that have put pledges forward to make sure that they are doing that. And frankly, we're calling them on the carpet. And I will say that, this time around, I do believe we've seen some changes. It's not just lip service. And, fortunately, our parent company, Urban One, we have radio stations in 56 markets and, television division, a digital division, and we will call people out if they are not, living up to what is coming out of their mouth. So those are some of the ways that we're doing it. And then, of course, internally, we have constant mechanism for feedback, from our employees during, specifically during COVID and Black Lives Matter. I held biweekly small chats with random, groups of people, from secretaries to production assistants to, whoever. HR just literally randomly every 2 weeks pick 8 people in the company, and literally have gone through every single employee to have a personal lunch with me to talk about, everything that's going on both in the country, in our organization. And, those are providing personal insights to me around what is going on. And we use that to inform our policies and, how we operate as a company. And that's been actually very rewarding for me to do.
Thank you very much, Michelle. And it seems that this moment in time has allowed us to do things that we may not have had the opportunity to do before, in terms, and certainly your position as president enables you to do that. So thank you for that. Let me shift over to Rachel to ask a question, because as Michelle was saying, that there's been so much focus on DEI as it relates to race in particular, African American and BIPOC folks. But you bring a unique perspective, just as you shared in your remarks too, and kind of like being raising a child with multiple disabilities who has become an advocate. I'm sure when you mention his name, people should go out and Google him, because you're a proud mama, and that's good. But I'd like to get your perspective about how you've become and how one becomes an advocate for particularly those folks with disabilities, and how do we prioritize some of these things on DEI issues, and how would we approach DEI in that true spirit, because certainly this is a lived experience for you. So please share. Oh, you muted again. Sorry.
I'm just going to say, if anyone wants to look him up, Ezekiel-Fishbein, look him up. You'll find a lot in Google. But you're right, David, my perspective about DEI is informed by raising a child with multiple disabilities and experiencing great prejudice from educators and other families. It's also really informed by teaching at Temple. When I started teaching at Temple and saw the diversity of our students and compared that to what I see in the PR field in our city, it's pretty surprising. We've got an incredibly diverse student body, and we've got an incredibly white PR field in Philly, and we need to do more about that. And I say this to call out my peers, because agencies here aren't doing enough. A few are, but most aren't. So, right now, any thinking person is going to realize that racism is baked into our system. You couldn't not understand that. So race does come to the forefront of the conversation, and that's normal and natural, and it should in the US. And I think what we need to remember is that equity isn't finite, right? So we can talk about race, and we can talk about Asian Americans, and we can talk about LGBTQ plus people, and women, and people with differing abilities, and so on and so on. And it's that capital letter "and" that we need to look at, right? That's how we form organizations that represent the fullness of our community. Because the thing that's really the hardest in terms of diversity is when these different underserved populations intersect. Okay, so we have people who already have a playing field that's unequal. Perhaps it's an Asian American person, or a Black person, or a Latinx person, and then they have a disability. And now they've got these two things together, and all of that is making it harder for them. And again, I see that in my classroom. When I get kids with disabilities who also have other differences. Excuse me. So we know, you take a sip, guys.
Sure, absolutely. Always good to have water nearby. You know, it's all good.
I get so excited about this time.
I know, and it shows.
Excuse me. So we know that 30% of working age people with disabilities are unemployed. And yet we know that most people with disabilities can work and want to work, right? And we know that these people with disabilities, the unemployment rate has gone up substantially. In fact, in Philadelphia, women with disabilities have been most impacted by COVID and loss of jobs than any other underserved group in the city. So now look at the intersection of race and ability, right? So you've got 3.4 million working age African Americans with disabilities in this country, okay? Only 29% of them are employed, while 72% of African Americans without disabilities are employed, okay? So 40% of African Americans with disabilities live in poverty in this country, compared to 22% of African Americans without disabilities, okay? So double the number of African Americans with disabilities live in poverty from other people of color. And to give you an idea of who are the people I'm talking about, African Americans with disabilities, Stevie Wonder, Halle Berry, Damon John from Shark Tank. So this is really, really important stuff, this intersectionality. And what I would say about what do we do about it is we have to think about the fact that we are the communicators. That's what we do for a living. So we are helping organizations create messages, and we're helping them talk to other people outside of their organization. And those other people outside of their organization look just like the people I was just describing, right? 1 in 5 people in this country has a disability. More than half of the people are women. Organizations need to know how to talk to people who don't necessarily look like their leadership. And the only way to do that is have people with lots of different lived experiences coming into your organization and creating a path to leadership. Because it's not good enough to hire someone if they don't have a way to feel like they are contributing enough and honored enough that they get to grow into a leader at that organization.
Great point. Thank you, Rachel. And it also gives me a great way to segue into Elizabeth, because to your point, Rachel, knowing that, you know, building those pathways is one thing, it's what you do when you get there. And Elizabeth, you and I share the distinction, I guess, of being the first persons to be serving in our role. So I'd love to get your perspective of what, as the first person at Levi Strauss to hold the role that you hold, what do you bring to the position? And I know your lived experience is certainly part of that. And how are you approaching this important work at this important time in which we find ourselves, both in the industry and as a country and globe, even broader?
Absolutely. I think uniquely what I bring to the position is my communication skills, my ability to tell the stories, to capture the stories, to shape the narrative, to engage the key stakeholders, and I mean from our frontline employees to our CEO, using my communication skills, thank you, Klein, using my communication skills and bringing that to the table, as well as the view that diversity, equity, and inclusion is underpinned by change management. It's going to boil all the way down to individual changes, and also obviously the broader lens of systemic and organizational changes. And how I am approaching it at LS & Co. is, you know, primarily is a focus on equity. So when I came in, the function existed. It was founded in 2018, but it was buried rather deeply in the organization with a director level employee leading the function. And the name of the function was diversity, inclusion, and belonging. And I have shifted us into diversity, equity, and inclusion because we need to focus on equity and looking at our processes and our systems and ensuring that we are doing everything that we can to strip the bias or the potential for bias out of them, or teach our people managers and our leaders how to mitigate bias in systems. How are we being fair in the things that we are doing, the people and talent processes? And so that focus on equity is really what's leading us. And then, setting that as kind of our global framework, there is a overarching global strategy, which I've just started rolling out in the beginning of March. And then that is going to be operationalized through local action plans. So as I look at the organization, and we're a global organization with 15,000 plus employees that span the globe, it's really hard to set goals and create programs when you sit in San Francisco for people that are in Asia, for people that are in Latin America, for people that are in the Middle East and Africa, because diversity looks differently. We're talking about intersectionality and the different kind of identities that are at play. Imagine opening that up to a global audience and global employee base, where in some cases, it might be a culturally monolithic society, or ethnically, I should say, monolithic society. So maybe they're not necessarily looking at race, maybe it's more about gender and ability, or even though every country has its own caste system or the way that they prioritize folks and what the norm or the ideal is, and then the culture and the economy and businesses all kind of fall in line around that. And so being very, very purposeful and intentional in creating a global strategy, but then looking locally at different markets and saying, okay, what are the identities or dimensions of diversity that are critical here that we can help drive towards an action against to establish equity and really the broader diversity, inclusion. And one point I want to make about inclusion versus belonging is inclusion is the action and belonging is the outcome. So I know there were folks, a key point that I hit on as I'm socializing the strategy with employees around the world is that belonging didn't go away. We're just talking about we need to more focus on inclusion in order to get us to the belonging that we really crave, which is that psychological safety and that space where our employees really can feel empowered to be their authentic selves and do their best work.
Wow, that's powerful, and I know that folks are kind of following this on social media. So I hope someone is going to hashtag that. Inclusion is the action, and belonging is the outcome. I think that's powerful. And if you don't mind, I'd like to stay with you a little bit on this, Elizabeth, to kind of go a little bit further, because in our respective roles, we, even by title, we're expected to be the champions for diversity, equity, inclusion, and so forth. But knowing, to your point, and in your instance, you're talking about a global stage that DEI covers so much. And I'll be coming back to Rachel and Michelle on the same question, and it can be, as you know, very complex, complicated, nuanced, and sensitive. So where do people who want to be allies in this work, where do they start? And if they can champion this, and how can we sustain the activism? How can we make sure that we're not in a moment, that this is a place that can become momentum over time?
Yeah, and I don't have a silver bullet answer that I'm going to drop, but what I am going to say is that you have to figure this out. You have to go on an individual journey with diversity, equity, and inclusion, and really educate yourself. We've said, oh, you can find this on Google. We said that a few times. Like, there's so much out there at this point that if you are not tapped in or tuned in or on some type of journey, it's literally because you're choosing not to be. Because at this point, there's so many documentaries, books, TED Talks, articles, research. I follow multiple thought leaders on social media and even on LinkedIn. And, for myself, use the hashtag Action for Equality. There's so much information out there. It has to be a self-sustaining effort, a starting effort and a self-sustaining effort. You have to decide that this is important to you. The things that are important to us, we make them happen. We don't make excuses. We don't say we're too busy for this. We're still kind of under the quarantine, the COVID quarantine rules. So we're home more than ever. We're probably still on social more than ever. We need to take dedicated time and really dig in, and you're going to find your energy, you know, whether that's mentoring or that is, you know, sharing books with friends or being in a book club or, you know, volunteering or reaching out to people on LinkedIn. Now it's so much more acceptable to reach out and just connect with people and say, hey, you know, I work at a great company. Have you ever looked at Ellis & Co. and thought about a career here? There's so many groups out there. So I really want to encourage people not to sit and wait for your chief diversity officer or your leader or someone in your life to tell you to get on the journey. You know, we're watching it unfold daily. We started talking about, you know, the anti-Asian hate that we're seeing come to life. We're in the middle of the, you know, the trial for the murder of George Floyd. It's going to keep coming up. It's going to keep, we have a long road to travel until we solve racism and discrimination and bigotry and bias. And it's not going away unless we actively dedicate ourselves to the journey, really, to the journey.
Thank you for that, Elizabeth. And I'm also seeing questions coming up in the chat, but let me kind of continue this train of thinking. Rachel, same question. And how do we get folks to become allies and champions of DEI? And I know you and I have shared many conversations about that in terms of allies, advocates, and accomplices. You know, someone who's willing to go and fight with, you know, on your behalf. So please share, and then I'll get to Michelle, and then we'll keep it going. Still muted.
I did it again, guys. Something about not learning, right? I love that you brought up the allies thing. I think that came up in a conference you and I were listening to online, and it's a great concept. I would say the first step is to talk less, listen more, right? You really have to recognize that we all bring our lived experiences into our work, into our life, into our classroom. So when we start to recognize that other people's experiences and perspectives have as much value as our own, rather than thinking, well, to be a part of my university, to be part of my classroom, to be part of my organization, someone else has to conform to my expectation, right? When we get away from that, we start to value what other people bring to the table, value that person, value how the organization is going to grow because of them. We spoke about my son before. So in one of his jobs recently, he doesn't have autism, but he was working in a special needs capacity within an internship in the Senate. And he was actually asked to write a guidebook about how to interview people on the autism spectrum, because they were getting people in for interviews, but the people interviewing them weren't able to connect with them in the way they needed to, and they weren't getting the jobs. So someone there recognized that it wasn't that the person on the spectrum had to change, it was that the interviewer had to change, and they had to realize their expectations weren't realistic and weren't okay. So as we start to pay attention to and honor other people's stories, we stop viewing them through our lens. And another example of this that just happened to me, I'm working with a wonderful organization called the Lion Story. It's an organization that was created to go into other organizations actually and help them to have conversations about race and help them tell their story. And the name comes from an African proverb that says, the lion story will never be known as long as the hunter is the one to tell it. Well, I was really honored. I got to interview the people who founded the organization. And the interview went so long that when I started to write my blog post about it, my post was too long because it was really just the interview condensed down. And I went to edit it and I said, wait a minute, let's look at the name of this company, the Lion Story, right? If I start editing their words as a white woman, I'm not letting them tell the story in their own words. And instead, I went back to my contact there. I said to her, I want to go through this and highlight what I think are the key points and what I think we should include. And then could you do me a favor? Could you look at it and tell me if I hit the right things? You know, feel free to put your own spin on it. So it was like that moment of being thoughtful and saying, wait a minute, what's the goal here? And the goal is to let these individuals tell their story. I want to say one more thing, and I don't want to use up more than my share of the time, but I think we really have to be brave. And I think that for someone like me, you know, a white Jewish woman, that's an interesting thing to say, because I think that probably the people on this call, people of color, have had to be brave a lot longer than I have. And they live their entire lives being brave. So I want to put out there that I respect that. But I think that particularly those of us who want to be allies need to be brave. And we have to speak up publicly, even when it's risky. You know, doing it in the safety of our own home, that doesn't count for much. It's when you're sitting in a meeting, especially with someone who holds power over you, and you understand the privilege that you already own. And so you're willing to take the risk and get out there and say something. And I'm going to give another example, because this is one of the things I've done that's been the most meaningful for me, and I encourage other people to do it. When I'm driving and I see the police pull someone over, I look and I try to see what that person looks like they pulled over. And if that is a person of color, I pull over, I get out of my car, and I just stand up and watch. I don't turn on my phone. I'm not trying to record them. I just stand there, because I want them to understand that there's someone bearing witness to what's going on. And that's my own little piece of trying to use my white privilege that way. I think we each do it in different ways. But I think we have to be willing to open our mouths and use our own power.
Oh, thank you for that, Rachel. A lot to unpack there. And we're getting a bunch of questions in the chat. So I want to get to Michelle, particularly as both president and a mother and a person of color. There's a whole lot of intersectionality about, so how do we, as a society, and even in your leadership role, you know, get folks to really be allies and advocates and be able to do that. Then, just so folks know who are on the Zoom, we will be about to open this up so we can have more direct questions. So Michelle, go right ahead. How do we do this?
Well, I'm going to be short because you do have a lot of questions popping up in the chat, and I think a lot has already been said, and I agree with all that's been said. I'm just going to go back to what Elizabeth said to start, that, you know, really, if you're not doing the work, and if you're not aware, if you're not proactively, you know, involved in it, it's because you don't want to be. You know, but as a leader in my organization, you know, for us, allies don't always look like us, and 9 times out of 10, they probably don't. I just want to say to people, you know, allies come from all different places. So we just make sure that you're, you know, reaching out to everyone. And in my case, as in the media industry, most of the people who I sit at the table to do deals with don't look like me. They're not female and they're not African American. And so at the end of the day, I do part of, you know, what I have to do in my job every day really is to inform and educate. And I've been doing that since, I remember when we were launching TV One in 2004 and going into offices to talk about, you know, this new channel targeting African Americans with quality images and telling our stories, and literally everyone saying, well, why do we need that? We already have one television network for Black people. Like, one, okay, is enough. Look, so, you know, I'm like, well, you only have one network. Why would you say, you know, why do we need another you know, Black network? There's opportunity for more there. And as you see, like I said, I do think we're at a period of reckoning where we've been saying this for years, and now we see, you know, people are really trying to provide images, you know, for all the different areas, from, you know, people of color, LGBTQ plus, I mean, all it. So I hope that that means that people are getting it. You know, so I would say my responsibility every day when I go out and present is to continue to inform and educate. You know, but when I look at an ally, really is someone who's putting action towards the words. It's not just the words that you know, matter. We had plenty of companies and plenty of people using hashtags Black Lives Matter, but really, what are you doing to demonstrate that? What is the true social impact behind the words? And so when I look at allies, I look at people that we have partnered with who are actually doing the work, who are actually creating opportunities for real social change and social impact.
Thank you for that, Michelle. We're going to open it up to the panelists, to the folks who are in the webinar. But there was one question that came up through the channel that I'd like to see if we can grab with, and you all can decide who wants to go first at this. And that is, there's a lot of research that's out there in terms of folks who are graduating. We have a lot of students who are on our Zoom now that are looking for companies who, Michelle, to your point, are committed to it, not just in lip service, but are committed to doing the work to live this reality of not only racial reckoning, but diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in a real sense. So one of the questions is, what are some of the things that kids who are or students who are graduating now, you know, what are some of the opportunities? What are some of the things that they should be looking for? And even how to go about living this experience of being either a champion, an ally, or an advocate, just coming out of this time in which we find ourselves, and the education in which they have embraced. So any one of Elizabeth, Michelle, or Rachel, whoever wants to take a cut at it first.
Sure, I'm happy to jump in and say, so there, I think now more than ever, there are more entry-level roles into diversity. Also, some roles that are in HR or in internal or even external communications and PR, where your diversity communications will be a big part of what you do. I have a specialist on my team that's, I think, 2 years out of college. And I think she is the best job on our team because she gets to work across much of what we do, from our employee resource groups to our communications to specialized research projects. So I think there is a lot out there, and especially because, as we all know, in 2020, pretty much every organization made a renewed commitment or doubled down on their their focus and their commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I think hiring within the function is at an all-time high. And so if you are looking, this is probably now through the next year, or at least, because I know a lot of organizations set goals that they were going to achieve growth and movement in DEI by 2025. Some commitment go beyond that, but it's, you know, what's wonderful, what's the silver lining of all of the, you know, hardships that we've seen and the tough things that we've witnessed, is that there's a true commitment in terms of dollars and investment in diversity, equity, and inclusion. You know, the roles existed before, but they were, meaning for corporations and on the corporate landscape, but they were either very deeply in the organization, or they had ridiculous budgets. And by ridiculous, I mean so little that you really weren't able to move the needle, and the expectations were kind of outsized. And so it's a pretty good market right now, and I think it's going to continue to be that over the next few years. And in terms of your assessment of organizations, you know, I would look at several different, I would look and see, what does their leadership look like? You know, what is their representation at the top? I would look at, what do they say on their website about diversity, equity, and inclusion? Are they sharing what their representation is? Are they saying more about the commitments and the actions that they are taking, and not just numbers and kind of promises of growth? You know, are they active on LinkedIn? Are they telling their stories on a regular basis of employees? Even when you look at their marketing and their advertising, you know, who are they marketing and advertising to? Are they inclusive in their ads? So you should also be holding companies accountable as you look at them for either volunteer or hiring opportunities, and ask the questions as you're going through the interview process. What is the commitment? How do you all think that you're doing? Do you have hope? And are you working towards real commitments and bringing your commitments to life?
I'm so glad you said that, Elizabeth, the last part of what you just said. So I tend to teach the portfolio class here at Klein, and we spend about 2 to 3 hours of that class each semester just looking at websites. We look at different agencies and we look at how they present themselves and what they want you to think and what they say when they're running a job ad. And then we go and we look at all the group pictures and we look at the leadership pictures, and we start to look at the activities that they're engaging in. And we also look for things that's like signs of tokenism. Do they have one of this and one of that?
Yes.
And I'm
Yes.
always, I'm always advising the students that if all you see is one, that's a problem. Or if you don't see anyone in leadership, why do I only see junior people who look a certain way? What is it about that organization that makes it uncomfortable for that person to grow there? So important.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. You have to look below the hood.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying we were being very cordial. We were all kind of unmuted while other people were answering, and then we started to get a little amen corner, like, yes, that's right, absolutely. So Michelle, I saw you had unmuted yourself, and I'm watching our clock because we're going to start to do some.
No, I was just going to say, like she said, look under the hood. She took the words. I was going to say, kick the tires before you buy the car. Because at the end of the day, you can see it, but you can also go into a company and be a change agent. So,
Absolutely.
If you go to a company, and I mean, obviously, sometimes you can't find out all this stuff, but if you go to a company and you find that it's lacking, you can try to be a change agent in your organization. I, was always pointing out different things, I still socialize things to my CEO. Here are companies that we do business with. They're doing this. We should think about this. How does that impact our employees? So I think that you can always be a change agent. And then if it's not a good fit, then you leave. But definitely, because of all the money that is being poured into a lot of different organizations with the commitments over the next couple of years, corporate communications, how people are going to tell their stories, with the money that they're doing, advertising, making sure that we're seeing, the images on the screen. There are so many different opportunities from a comms perspective that I think, it's just right now.
Absolutely. Well, let me take the opportunity, a little bit of facilitator privilege, to thank Michelle and Rachel and Elizabeth for really just, we knew we were going to run out of time. This is such a deep and complex and just what a topic. So we want to thank you for your time for that. I've given my instruction to hand back to my good friend and colleague, Jackie Hawkins, who's going to take us home. We're still going to be able to end on time. So, and also our other our colleague Lynn has taken notes from the chat. We'll be getting them to folks because there were some really good questions that we just didn't get to. So Jackie, over to you.
Thank you so much, David. Yes, and seriously, Elizabeth, Rachel, Michelle, just insightful. Thank you for your dedication to representation. And I don't want to have to go in too deep. I know we want to be very conscious of time, but the stories that you support, that you promote, that you have, that you live is really just exciting and thrilling to hear that the work that's happening, you're making the changes, making the impacts, and there's still more work to do. And so that's really my closing, is that this is the beginning of a conversation, not the end of it. And so we're so excited to continue on the next phase of this series. We will be absolutely reaching out to alumni. We want to hear from you. What topics, what conversations are you eager to hear and to understand about how we as Klein, and really just us as a family, the Klein family, how can we have those conversations and get to know each other more? And so a couple of things that we're thinking through, just so you all are aware, is more conversations about the landscape of digital communications and how the COVID world and our virtual world has really shifted us in a whole different direction and trajectory. A few as well on potentially servicing specific conversations for students and young alumni around being minorities and majority media markets. So lots of things that are coming up the pike. We'd love to hear from you. Please do not hesitate to reach out. And I want to thank everyone for their time. David Boardman, would you like to say a quick good night to everyone, just as from the dean's side of things?
Yeah, I just want to thank our panelists. As the dean, I'm just so humbled that we have such awesome people as our alums, and just know that we in the whole Klein family, in past and present, are just so proud of you and so grateful to have your time and your wisdom to share with all of us. And Jackie, thank you for doing this. The great ideas that the Alumni Association had. I really look forward to the future sessions, and I hope everybody will join us. So I hope you all have a wonderful night.
Good night.